would drive LNG as a fuel to become something they provide within their ports. And you can see that the orange bar there, the demand from ship owners and also gas supplier would push port terminals to put these plans in place. And purely, this is not just about them saying, yeah, we know LNG is coming. Some of them have done their research into understanding LNG as a fuel. However, a lot of them are sort of a landlord ports whereby they provide this facility through a third party. So they're thinking that it shouldn't be part of our master plans. It might be something that we'll consider as a 3-year plan, but if we see demand coming from ship owners, we definitely will look at providing this fuel. Again, now, putting all these parts and parcels together, then we decided we need to look at demand. What would be the demand in terms of new build project? And also, what is the size of LNG bunker we're looking at in the future? And this brings me to the LNG demand bunkering model. Right, our bunkering model focuses on 4 major ship types: the dry bulk carrier, oil tanker, container ships, and cruise ships. And what we did was select major trade routes, deep sea trade routes that would essentially could likely adopt LNG for deep sea trades. I mean, you can see all the list of trade routes we've selected there: the Far East Europe, transatlantic and trans-Pacific for container ships. Also, having selected all of these trade routes and trying to look at their voyages throughout in encountering with current ECAs, and also when the global sulfur limits kicks in. We also take into account some of the smaller ship types. There are still deep sea ship types, but however could behave in a certain operational pattern as some of the major 4 that we've already selected. And now the LNG bunkering model. These are the scenarios we've adopted, and these are driven by 3 major factors here. The first factor, like most of the speakers before me have talked about, regulatory compliance. I mean, regulatory compliance is about these emission control areas. And also another stage to that is the 0.5% global sulfur limits you'll get by 2020. And then going down is the new build demand. How much of the capacity expected to be deployed on those trade routes would adopt LNG, and those are based on sentimental values. What we know now, how many comfortable can we see adopting LNG? And the third element is the fuel prices, which I will come to in a moment. But in terms of our base case scenario, when we say base case, that's what we know today as of how the market is developing. And we try to be as prudent a little bit as possible to understand what we know to drive those 3 factors forward. In terms of our high case model, the main change for that is really to add on a few provocative set of assumptions, like expecting an ECA to come up in Japan, for example, because again, they might see that environmental regulation might be a good thing for that area. So we put some in place for 2018 in Japan and Singapore. In terms of the 0.5% global sulfur limit, we expect that to go ahead by 2020. In terms of the new build demand, the propensity for ship owners to adopt LNG as a fuel for their engine going forward, we put that as 75%, a little bit higher than the base case, which is 45%. And then when you get into fuel price, and this is where things get a little bit kind of sensitive, because again, like we've heard about from various speakers, and also from the market sentiment, forecasting energy pricing these days is something that you hope to get right, but no one knows what would happen. But in what we've done with this sentiment is to, first of all, take today's prices for MGO, HFO, and LNG, as we've seen discussed in normal alliance prices between a buyer and a seller for LNG. And then we then drive that prices forward up to 2025 by a year-on-year increase of a specific reference gas prices. That reference gas prices for this module, to stress it, it's on Henry Hub. And then that's just 25% increase we expect year-on-year going forward. Also, in terms of the high case model, what we then felt was that prices of LNG, of what we know today, if we reduce it by 25%, what would that relationship be as you drive forecast year-on-year growth going forward? So there are several sets of assumptions put into this module to drive a view on demand. And just again to emphasize that this module is not about saying that this is what will happen, but it's just to test several factors that might develop LNG as a fuel, and knowing that we can change some of these parameters to suit what your assumption might be, or what a shipyard's assumption might be, or what a ship owner or gas supplier's assumptions might be going forward. And then in terms of the rationale behind the model, we've got two major sets of drivers within the model. What we essentially did was plan the adoption of the new build adoption for LNG prices. Excuse me. By the time of voyage spent in global sulfur limits, or ECA. We feel that if, for example, 75 and above % of your voyage time is spent in global sulfur limits, then we see that 45% of new build projects going on to the market on the specific year would adopt LNG. In the high case scenario, the highest one is 75%, like I said before. So it's all depending on how much of their voyage time is spent in ECA or global sulfur limit. Then the more they are encountering ECA, or the more, by the time we get into 2020 and you get global sulfur limit, you're having the highest point for a base case scenario to be 45% going forward. So different assumptions have been put in place to enable to see what might develop if sentiment goes one way or another. The second rationale within this is really about cost savings. So we look at pricing, looking at the forecast prices we've done for each year, each base case or a high case scenario. If a trade route demonstrates over 30% savings on fuel, compared to LNG savings fuel compared to the cheapest alternative, whether it's an HFO with a scrubber option or MGO pricing for that year, then that selected adoption for that route will be LNG. If they don't demonstrate above 30%, you get lower adoption as you go forward. So there's certain different interplay within this module that if I had an hour, I could go through it with you and we can just shell out each point. But the main crux of this module is that it's very, very dynamic. It's interactive. You can tell me today and say, I feel I can sell LNG at, I don't know, 400 US dollars per ton. And then we put it in the model. It does what it does, and then it comes out with some figures of demand. So just to give you a taste of the output, I mean, if any one of you would like to talk through this and have a half-an-hour session with me today, tomorrow, or Thursday, please let me know, because there are so many key drivers that has developed this module. But this is our base case output. And this is showing you the demand we expect for new build projects up to 2025. It's a cumulative number, and out of 15,000 plus,